I apologize for getting this out so late, but had a long day at work and then had to come home and play catch up, answer about a dozen different messages, go through about 1,000 different comments, and make sure that I wasn't misspeaking with information that had already been covered. What you're looking at here is the location just to the east of Singapore where this collision allegedly occurred between the Alnic MC and the USS John McCain. While the strait or the channel up in Japan was described as very, very busy, this one has been described as the single busiest in Asia, if not in the world. And you'll see in a minute when I show you the video of the AIS track that that is definitely the case. This happened very, very early in the morning thanks to Bill McCanless, a very regular contributor to the channel. We don't always agree, but he has maintained a level of military bearing that has kept him here at the channel. Very much appreciate his input. Just like anyone else's, agree or disagree, you maintain bearing and you're going to stay around. If you don't maintain bearing, you will be gone. But without any further ado, we have a lot to cover in this video. We're just going to go right to it. Just real quick, we are going to go to this. This area down here, Singapore, is, you can see it's 9:13 a.m. GMT is this line up here. This is 1:13, so we can say it's GMT plus 8. So when we look at the track here, oops, sorry, that was another great contributor. Let's see if we can find it. There we go. 2024 GMT, 8:24 p.m. for civilians. Add 8 to that and you have 4:24 in the morning. We've already played forward a little bit here just to save some time, and we are going to go ahead and play this. So here we go. A lot of traffic, at least at this point here, running fairly clear. I'm going to try to do some updates on times. 4:45, 4:50. Supposedly the John McCain got hit on her port, so she would have been up here at some point. You're going to see a lot of traffic come into that region. Just crossed after 5 o'clock, 5:10 now. And very shortly, right about here, we see that it makes a 90-degree turn to its port because of an alleged collision. Now, the collision was supposed to have come from up here somewhere, so apparently the McCain would have had to cut literally right through the Guangzhou-Wan's line of travel as well to do it, unless, and I alleged this before with the issue with the crystal and the fits, that maybe the fits had been running right underneath the track of the crystal. Really, really super close to her and then cut over, but the Navy said that wasn't the case. She was traveling outbound, so that blew that theory out of the water. But once again, for this ship to have reacted this way with a hard 90-degree turn to port as a result of a collision, the type of which we see on the McCain, which is a puncture right at the waterline, way back aft port, she would have almost had to have been coming this way. But the Navy says they were both heading for Singapore, and you wouldn't have been going this way to be heading for Singapore. So, once again, incredibly inconsistent evidence here that doesn't agree with what we're seeing. If this had been something where the McCain had, I'm sorry, it's just, a lot of ships. If McCain had been running parallel to her this whole way, even when we saw all of these ships, running right up alongside and, really, really super close, and then just decided to pass and overtake, we wouldn't have seen just that perfectly symmetric little eraser head dent. We would have seen scraping up and down the side from where that, punctured and where it went. It's, it's the only way you get something like that is if she was coming this way. And why would the destroyer, if they're going toward, let's see if I can pull the map here. This general area is right here. If they're going towards Singapore, why would that ship have been going this way to cross her path? And this is You know, this is the whole reason that we have the types of people that we have here at the channel. Because when these types of things happen, you know, things should add up. When you look at, I'll see if I can find it. I know that in one of my videos I covered the track of the Porter and the MV Ottawazon in that accident back in 2012, and it made perfect sense. There was a giant, or not a giant, but there was a giant curving track for the oil tanker, and then just this little hiccup where the collision allegedly occurred, but no giant 90-degree turns, and everything made sense for what they said it was. I'll see if I can find the link and get that down in the description to the track of the MV Ottawazon that hit the Porter. Because from what I'd been listening to all day, this seemed like this might have actually been, you know, what they're saying it was, that it was just an accident. But looking at that track, you know, I'll play it a little bit farther forward here to show you what happens with this oil tanker they've described that takes miles to do turns. Okay, and they've said this. And also there's been this allegation that this thing was running real high in the water. The picture I showed it high in the water, but this thing was supposedly had 12,000 gallons of some type of fluid aboard. So she wasn't empty. So here we go. Clearly didn't take her that long to completely turn. 5:43 in the morning now, 5:45. And this one does this same thing where it does a full 90-degree turn there. And physics is physics, folks. I mean, you can say, well, she stopped because she hit the destroyer. If something 50,000 tons is moving at 10 knots and it hits the rear end of a little 8,000-ton destroyer, that collision is not going to bend her 90 degrees. It's not going to do it. It's going to slam into the destroyer, knock it out of the way. It may adjust its course a little bit, but not 90 degrees. You know, and if this is what they're saying it is, this giant oil tanker, then it should not have been able to make this maneuver at all that quickly. But as we can see here, it went from 10 knots. I'll see if I can back it up a little bit to show you how quickly this thing made this turn. A little bit farther here. In fact, the collision is at 52 seconds in this video, if anybody wants to know. Okay, so here she goes. And look how fast that stop was. I mean, comparatively speaking to the other vessels, it's like she hit a brick wall. I mean, once again, I'll say it. Army guy, not a Navy guy, but I've had a lot of Navy guys that watched the track of the Fitzgerald and the Crystal issue and said the same thing. How could that cargo ship have done what they're saying it did on that track? And something else I wanted to cover, actually, and I had gone there, another contributor, John Morton, sent me this speed track. And I just wanted to show you guys this link, because it shows a completely different story. This is marine traffic, and this is the Alnic MC, and it shows this speed track for that time in the morning. And the times are down here from 4 to 5. And it doesn't show the ship being anywhere near 10 knots. So riddle me this. How does this work? I mean, this blue shows the draft of the ship. This shows the speed of the ship. So, you know, this argues with that AIS track completely. You know, and this is, you know, you take one versus the other. You know, this is marine traffic. And that's what they're saying was going on. And this thing was supposedly down at, you know, after 5 o'clock was down at 2 knots. But it just doesn't make, once again, we have another story here that just makes absolutely zero sense to logic. And that we have two of them this close together. I've had a couple other contributors that have taken us down a road that might explain some of this. I've had these names written down. Rebecca Roth has been with us since the beginning and a fantastic contributor. I have been remiss in acknowledging her contributions, along with a lot of you folks. I really, really have. I think I mentioned Bill McCanless. He has been here and helped us out quite a bit. He hasn't always agreed with me, but he's maintained military bearing, and that will keep you here. You know, I don't care if you agree or disagree, as long as you maintain your bearing and can argue your point articulately, then we will definitely keep you around. Sylvia Gaub, both of them actually provided the same link to me about this GPS spoofing that has been reported by New Scientist. And way back, and I mentioned this in my last video, my first thought was the best way to do this. You know, if you had a ship out there, like Navy ship, that was in a congested lane, they teach these guys not to trust their eyes. They teach them to trust their instruments. And if they think that their eyes are telling them one thing and the instruments are telling them another, you know, and if they're going to default to their instruments wouldn't have to be off by very, very much to create this type of a collision. And we've seen both of these collisions happen in these tight shipping lanes. And I know those of you that are arguing out there about the idea of accidents happening, absolutely they happen. They happened last year, they happened 5 years ago, they happened when I was in. But in the history of bulbous bows on ships, and they've been on there for 30, 40 years, this year is the first time there has ever been any documented case of loss of life because of collision as a result of bulbous bow penetration at or below the waterline of any ship. What's different about this year than any other year? It's not that much busier in those shipping lanes. And anybody saying, well, you know, this is Obama's Navy, I was in during the switch over from Bush Sr. to Clinton, and we didn't just all decide one day because Bill Clinton was president we aren't going to do our jobs, you know, or that we were going to do our jobs in a much less efficient way, or lose our military bearing and just give up on life. It doesn't work that way. Really, the person who is in the Oval Office has very little to do with how well or poor someone does their job at any one specific point in time in the military. Now you can say, well, after 8 years of Obama and the changes over the leadership, you could have made that allegation with Clinton. But 9/11 hit, and the military was called upon, and they responded, and they did a pretty damn good job. Being much, much smaller than the military that I was in. So I don't know that I'm even going to acknowledge that any more than I just did about that argument about the Obama Navy, or the Navy's been, infiltrated with people that just don't know what they're doing. I am still going to make the allegation that I do believe that there are forces out there that have taken advantage of the information gleaned from those Marines in South America. Because, folks, if you think the Navy's hiding this, I know some of you who've been with me for a long time will know exactly what I'm talking about, but some of you newcomers might not. Some time ago, I covered multiple times about what happened down in February, that the Marine commander of all Marine forces in the Southern Hemisphere had all of his electronics compromised for 14 hours. Nobody even knew he was compromised. And there was an issue being drugged in Colombia, and him and another underling, the amount of information that could have been gleaned from that, I find it's so unreported. The Miami Herald put it on page 4 in May of this year. It happened in February, and unless you've come to my channel, you don't know about it. And it was right after that. That was February. Then the kid goes missing aboard the other Ticonderoga class cruiser, the Peter Mims, I can't remember the name of the cruiser, the Shiloh. And then we find out that there's Muslims aboard the Shiloh celebrating Ramadan. And then the Fitz happens. And then we have all sorts of other issues where the kid then reappears after 7 days that he was hiding aboard ship. And then now we have this. For them to have been planning an attack or planning to disable this, they would have had to have some very specific information about these ships, and I can only think of one way they got it. And, you know, there might be other ways that we don't know about, but that would be, I think, a great place to start, especially since one of the Marines involved was Filipino. And they're all being court-martialed and, you know, dishonorably discharged, which should tell you something. This punishment for the Fitzgerald command structure, the 12 sailors, those are non-judicial punishments. That means no admiral's mass, no courts-martials, no nothing. That's going to be basically handled almost like a misdemeanor, like a civil offense, civil infraction. And I very much doubt they say, well, their careers will be over, but they're not being taken to any type of authority to deal with the 7 deaths. Nobody died, allegedly, as a result of the information being compromised by those 3 Marines in South America, but they had judicial proceedings and are having judicial proceedings and are being kicked out of the Marine Corps for that. So their punishment is worse. So what does that tell you about what the Navy might know about what happened with those Marines? If they're going to punish them worse than a commander that allegedly had 7 people die aboard his vessel because of something that he did or something he didn't do. So I didn't want to ramble on too much about that, but the more I'm looking at the evidence here, folks, somebody has some information and they're using it, and they're using it well. So anyway, this is a little bit more of a haphazard video than I wanted it to be, but Alnic MC, just wanted to cover this here, and it does state that 12,000 tons of oil from Taiwan to Singapore. So she was coming from Taiwan, just off the coast of China, so we have that as well. So 16, 17 minutes is much too long for these videos, but if anybody has any questions, please let me know. I will try to keep up with this. I have a very hectic week at work, and I am going to do the very best I can to make these videos as poignant as I can and as short as I can. So like, share, subscribe. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time. Thank you.